Okay, so we're at a good amount of attendees now, and if people want to still join in, they certainly can. But again, welcome to our Ask Me About Microgrants meeting here. We thank you guys for joining in today. My name is Mark von Eisenberg. I'm a program associate with Research America, and I'm going to share with you guys today some details about our Civic Engagement Microgrant program, some of the ways in which we'd love for you guys to get involved with us. And of course, one of the main objectives of this meeting is to field some of your questions and considerations, or at least give you the proper channels to make sure that your questions are answered. So again, thank you for recognizing the importance of a program such as this, a grant program that is. We want to make sure that you guys have the tools that are necessary to succeed with your plans. So before we begin, we'd love to know where some of you guys are coming from. If you'd be willing to, in the chat feature at the bottom of our little Zoom bar there, pop in either where you're calling in from or the university or institution that you're associated with at this time. It could give us a better sense of where you guys are at. We'd appreciate that. While you guys are potentially filling that out, I'll give you guys a little bit of background about what Research America is. Who is Research America? For those of you that are not familiar, Research America was founded in 1989, sort of out of the growing concern and identification that there's a gap between the potential of new biomedical research and the support that the American public might actually have for it. And I see some things coming in the chat here. Great, thank you. We have some Pennsylvania people, DC, Texas, great. UMass Amherst, awesome. So to get back to what Research America's real function is in the biomedical research enterprise is we're an advocacy alliance. So we have over 400 members that span academia, so lots of research institutes and universities, much like many of the ones that I'm seeing here, as well as science societies, professional societies, volunteer organizations, and other nonprofits. We are a nonprofit, as well as some private sector industry folks, pharmaceutical companies, and things such as that. And how we work is we ensure biomedical innovation is a national priority. So we focus on that topic rather than stances within that topic. And we try to mobilize public opinion and develop strategies that sort of succeed in getting citizens engaged. And we want those citizens to get their views and make them known to Congress and the White House in the long run. So hopefully that sort of sets the stage for why Research America is actively engaged in ensuring the success of this program that we've put on and now is in our third year, the Civic Engagement Microgrant Program. So the reason for starting this program back in 2018 was that we originally wanted students to engage with candidates that were running for office in the 2018 election cycle. Since then, we've expanded our scope to include engagement between scientists, much like yourselves, and elected officials and community leaders. So last year, we introduced a track called the Science Meets Science track, which is definitely catered to this specific focus, encouraging collaboration between social scientists, whether they be in sociology or anthropology or psychology, with STEM scientists. So people who are more in the chemistry or physics or mathematics applied fields. With the notion that the interchangeable conversations and the crosstalk that could happen between different disciplines is pivotal for us to sort of arrive at tangible solutions to our shared issues in this space. The point here is to provide opportunities for STEM graduate and postdoc trainees to develop these skills in communication and program planning, along with an understanding of government and how science can play a role in policy decisions so that we can make a difference in our communities. So this year, our focus is on these graduate student-led projects, which are going to try and create a dialogue between public officials and members of the community. For those of you, I can put this in the chat, but I'm sure many of you are familiar with our homepage. Might be a way that you were introduced to this in the beginning here. But let me just pop that in there. Oh, sorry. There we go. Thank you, Caitlin. That's the overview page that I'm sure many of you guys have seen. But let me dive into it a little bit more so that you can sort of identify, pull out the key opportunities that are really wrapped into this grant proposal and what we'd love to do with you guys and your groups. So new grants here are going to support high impact virtual, because it's 2020, programming using methods such as podcasting, webinars, and a new data visualization track that's actually quite interesting, and I'll bring up more a little bit later. But the thing that's worth note here is the work that comes from these types of programs or events that you might curate with your peers. There's potential here for, if the caliber is high, for you to actually have something to show publishable from it, which is definitely a great opportunity. Also, obviously, we want to provide opportunities for our students that are starting or interested in starting a local policy group, whether it be on your campus or with your affiliated institution in a different way. And we're very much willing and interested in hearing new proposals for the creation of new groups, so that we can help provide you with some sustained funding to sort of get your sea legs in that regard. And we also, the reason that this is an important thing is we understand that getting set up with the organization or the institution that you're under is often a challenge. So we're here to try and help with those initial steps as part of this. Another opportunity that's unique, or some other opportunities that are unique to this microgrant program, is that we actually are also offering a certificate granting science policy and advocacy course in partnership with the Federation of American Societies for Experimental Biology, or FASEB as they're colloquially known. And this is a great opportunity to actually be learning some interesting things all the while. So, and in that same vein here, we'll also be having modules that are intended to enhance the caliber of your microgrant program itself. So those include webinar trainings, as well as a science advocacy forum where we'll be able to host science communication sort of journal club. So these resources are a part of the program. The certificate granting course is something that in the application you can decide if you'd be interested in taking part in that. And the modules themselves are part of our correspondence throughout the period of the program. So the focus for 2021 here is, I'll go through, and this is on the site a little bit more, but I'll go through sort of how the types of areas that we're specifically looking for and the amount of money that we'd be willing to fund in those regards. So there's a breakdown of the types of programs that we want. Also, and I didn't say this on the onset here, but if I'm bringing up any, if I'm raising any points to anybody where you might have a question, obviously the objective here is to field all of those questions. So if it's best for you to jot one down and then ask it at the end, that's fine. You can also put it in the Q&A section, and we'll field it that way as well. So with that said, the first three areas that I mentioned here actually can be, they can be facilitated in either the traditional track or the Science Meets Science track, which, if you remember, is focused on the interdisciplinary sort of unison of multiple different science, softer science, social sciences, as well as harder sciences, with people from outside science potentially, so communications or public service, elected officials, that type of thing. So we are willing to be funding up to $2,000 for the design of a new virtual event. And there's been many that we've had in our previous years, from thought leader panels to webinars to op-ed workshops and virtual science fairs. It's actually worked well and would obviously be a welcome possibility for this upcoming year. And we obviously encourage your creativity here. So you can apply for this design your own virtual event arm in either the traditional sense. So that's for those who might have a group that they already work with, and you guys all want to put on an event or some type of program that is within your niche. You can also apply to design your own virtual event through the Science Meets Science guys, if that makes sense. So that virtual event would want to be bringing people from diverse sets of thought, sort of a diverse stakeholder room of new opinions, and try and get to a better understanding or some type of unison that you might arrive at through that program. So both options available. In the same vein here, podcasts are something that we've seen in previous years, and they were met with great success. And this is something that's very virtual friendly, obviously. And you can apply to have sort of the setup associated with getting a podcast up and running. So equipment costs, making sure that you have facilities, and as well as the promotion and the advertising, which are definitely important aspects of that arm of a program. You can do this in the traditional sense or with the Science Meets Science guys as well. Startup funding. Oh, and I should add, for podcasts, we'd be willing to fund up to $1,000. For startup funding, we'd be willing to fund up to $4,000. And we really want to encourage new groups to sort of come about. Excuse me. We want to encourage new groups to really get their voice out there, especially in geographic regions or from diverse backgrounds that historically have not necessarily had the opportunities or have been met with the means to get something like this up on its feet. But the ideas have been there. If that sounds like somebody, if that sounds like you, or if that sounds like people that you know, this is certainly an opportunity that we're really looking to fund those types of inspired ideas that haven't really found the infrastructure surrounding them to actually launch. So again, provides the opportunity for year-long funding with the potential of extension. And we want you to be building interest amongst your students, initiating programs, developing sort of sustainable local support and organizational support. So when the funding does dry up, you're in a good spot to succeed from then on out. And then lastly here, I'll introduce the data visualization track, and I'll add that the data visualization option is something that's actually only available in the Science Meets Science guys. So just to reiterate there, the Science Meets Science guys within data visualization sort of fits well, because when we think about the importance of making sure that graphical representations, obviously they can be sourced from diverse different fields, but the meaning that can come from them is sort of Gestaltian in the sense that it can be greater than the sum of its parts. When you have experts in, let's just, we'll say, experts in geophysics meeting up with experts in plant biology, meeting up with experts in meteorology to actually graphically represent an erosion process in a way that we've never seen before. There's a lot of power in something like that. So we're excited about this new track, and we hope that some of you are as well, because especially in this day and age, but always, the work that's done in the lab is only as good as how well you can get people to understand it. So this is an important thing that I think all of us definitely value. And lastly there, I'll just jump back and say, when it comes to budgetary things in your proposal, vague requirements are sort of what we need. So if it was a podcast that you were trying to get funded, we'd want to know, if you could do an Amazon search for us and ask, and sort of figure out how much a microphone would cost. That is suffice for the onset of the budgetary requirements there. If you're in a position to have a line-by-line list of things and everything is all thought out, that's terrific. But don't let that aspect sort of thwart your completion of this proposal. So real quick, I'll just mention some of the, and arbitrarily, I'll just mention some of the previous projects that have been done through our Civic Engagement Microgrant program. We can take a look at 2019. We funded 15 different graduate and postdoc-led science groups from around the country. They received between $1,000 and $3,000. Again, focus on that broad societal benefit and the local impact of research. Some of the titles included Lead in Our Water, a fact-finding symposium for improving our community's water quality, and that was done by a group at Duquesne University. Another group in Virginia, at Virginia Tech, used a pun from the Virginia Tech area and started the Big Lick of Science podcast, which has been met with success. A group at Amherst put on the program The Civic Scientist, translating your research training to broaden your impact. So again, a focus on how to actively and communicate. And if you want to see some of the other projects, I have a link here so you can take a look and see some of the other projects on the site. But they're definitely, you know, we encourage your creativity always, but we've already had a good amount of creativity, and it's always useful to see what others have done, so you can sort of learn how to improve on that or get inspired for some aspect of your novel work. Excuse me. All right, so I want to leave some room for questions here. I will just drop in with a few important notes that we'll all want to know. The first being that our round of proposals are due by November 9th, 2020. So that is one date to remember. Another date to remember is that our funding decision, so we'll be performing a review for essentially 2 weeks following that November 9th date. And our funding decisions, we're looking to have them announced on or around November 20th, 2020. From that period until June 1st of the following year, so you have from November 20th to June 1st, 2021, that's the period where we would require, the program to actually be facilitated in full. And if you ask yourself, well, what are my reporting responsibilities to Research America during that term? We do require that you keep in contact with us because we obviously have a vested interest in your success here. I don't want this to thwart any interest either, but we actually, we do look for a short sort of overview midterm report and a final report that give us valuable information that we can then pass along to our stakeholders who also have an interest in how this microgrant program works.
Wow.
I'm sorry, is there a question? I thought I heard somebody, but maybe I'll just continue and we can get to those questions in just a second. Another part of the communication with Research America that you'll be responsible for, or we'll both share the responsibility for, is we'll do some bi-weekly check-ins just to sort of get a sense of how things are going and if you need any additional resources. We have a rubric on the website for what the reviewers are looking for in competitive applications, and I'm going to drop that in the chat right now. But certainly use that to cater your proposal so that you're in the best possible stance to actually receive funding. And as an important detail, actually, so 2 more details and then I'll open it up. Students and student groups must be located in the US, but there is no requirement for any citizenship or anything like that in order to apply to this program. So as long as you are a graduate student or a postdoc, or you are an undergraduate student that is working with graduate students, you are eligible to apply. And you will need a fiscal sponsor as well, which is something that we can get into a little bit. So what is a fiscal sponsor? An example would be your institution, or if you are in a student organization and that student organization actually manages funds and have a bank account, the student organization can be the fiscal sponsor. But this is for the reason that we can't actually give grant money to an individual. We have to give grant money to an entity. And as my final point here, I just want to make a note that, excuse me, Research America is a 501c3 nonprofit. So as part of the what that entails under the tax code, we are a nonpartisan organization. So we do not support any activities that favor specific political parties or candidates. Essentially what that means for our micro grantees is, we welcome all kinds of civic science proposals, but we do not perform lobbying here. So we don't take a stance on an issue and then try and push that issue into fruition. We have a commitment to science, and we want to see science succeed. In programming, to fast forward what that would look like in a programmatic sense or an event that you guys wanted to put on, we would ask that your invitations or your panel members represent both sides of the aisle. Now, if you invite both sides of the aisle and not both sides of the aisle show up, at least you can report that both sides of the aisle were invited. But that's an important thing to note, that your work should be nonpartisan in part of this proposal. So I've gone on a little bit. I want to talk to some of you guys and try and answer your questions. I hope this was somewhat useful with some details. But let's take a look at questions. And if anybody wants to unmute their line, Beatrice St. John, I think I might have cut you off, and I apologize for that.
I think I lost my question, but give me a second.
I apologize.
So Mark, one question we got in the chat was about grant funding limited to graduate students only. Is it open to undergraduate nursing programs? And to that, we would say, thank you for your question, Nikki. As long as you are working with graduate students, you're eligible to apply. So I would recommend for undergrads to identify maybe through a Science Meets Science grant, if you don't have like a graduate nursing program or graduate students in your program, to pair with another graduate program in order to submit your application. But we definitely would welcome undergrads who have partnered with graduate students or postdocs for their program. I also received a question privately that I think would be really helpful to answer just generally about the FAFSA course, which we're really excited to offer this year as a way to help students understand and postdocs about policy more broadly, and then also kind of through examples and case studies, which is really great. For that course specifically, you will need to be a microgrant recipient to be eligible to take the course. That cohort is going to be pretty small, so we would encourage you to go ahead and submit a microgrant application, which can include the design your own, like forming a webinar, that kind of thing. We would like you to go ahead and apply and then check off your interest in the FAFSA course in the application. Thanks, Mark.
I appreciate that, Caitlin. And I actually might refer to you for a couple other questions that have popped in here. One of which being, are our projects limited to domestic US policy? And my initial answer is yes. Caitlin, I don't know if you could comment on that as well.
So the eligibility requirements are that you be a United States graduate student. You don't have to be a citizen of the United States. You just have to be in the US at a US-based institution. But we would definitely welcome applications that have a focus on international science cooperation. I think that could be a very cool webinar or a very cool structure for a program. So we would definitely encourage you to submit an application on that. And actually, that's going to be one of our case studies for our science policy course.
Cool, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Caitlin, for answering Jonathan's question there. We have another question that's asking about to elaborate a little bit about our vision for the data visualization proposal, and this comes from Manar. Thank you for that question. I'm not sure, I can speak to the data visualization segment a little bit because you'd mentioned that you might have missed a little bit of that. But this is actually new this year. And I was mentioning that we really value this new track and it has potential to grow in subsequent years based on how we do this year. But the focus here is the data visualization track is really only open to the Science Meets Science arm. So we were trying to engage multiple different disciplines to actually work together and arrive at some graphical unison when it comes to a problem or a shared issue area. Obviously, we understand that you know, complex sort of raw or not meaningful data, it can be tough to interpret and it can be tough to sort of get that information disseminated to the appropriate groups in ways that are most valuable to them. So our vision for proposals there are to try and instill that a greater meaning is being derived from the groups that you're able to bring together. If you have any more specific questions regarding that, please email microgrants@researchamerica.com and we can provide you a little bit more guidance.
I can also just chime in here. So thanks for your question, Manar. We envision the data visualization arm to be kind of a cool way for scientists to display data in interesting ways. So a lot of that can be through programming, but to give you a couple of examples of like civic engagement of that, I'm thinking about a particular project in which a student group was designing infographic-based images for those really long, cumbersome like receipts that you get on your prescriptions when you fill them. So like, you know, you get that kind of stapled page to like when you go pick up a prescription. So it would more be like, how do we make that readily digestible for people to understand how those drugs interact with, you know, different items, that kind of thing. So that would be an example of how like a civic engagement proposal would work for data visualization. Also, if you go to the New York Times, for example, and you see like their coronavirus page, right? Sometimes they have that map of the US with like different case rates and they show like spikes over time. So it's those types of projects are what we're looking for and ways to inform an audience focused on like your community to visualize data in interesting ways. So that was the idea for that. And I know we're running up on time. So Mark, I'm just gonna run through these questions like really rapidly, but
Sure.
Katie, to answer your question, there's not a limited or minimum number of participants in a group. I would say it's 2 or more to make it a group. So if you get a group together, as you draw interest in this, you're going to be the primary point of contact, but we would welcome you to add participants in your group, but 2 or more would be that requirement. Heather asks, can a program proposal contain multiple components? Yes, and we would absolutely really welcome that. That's something that you might even apply for startup funding for, or talk to us about multiple proposals so that we can fund 2 events, but that's definitely something that we would be looking to fund. And those are exactly the type of projects that you could do with this proposal. So if you need extra funding, just include that in the budget and describe both of your events and make sure they're done before June. Oh, Mark, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, my participants tab was hiding things. I was just saying thank you to you, Caitlin. I appreciate your insight here. And thanks again to all of you for actually for joining us today. I hope that this was somewhat helpful. We're just trying to give you guys all the tools that you can have here to succeed in your proposal. We want science obviously to be heard, and we need to engage the right people to make that a priority amongst the public as well. So with that, I'll respect our time because we're a little bit over. And I'll close out the meeting, but please do remember that we're only an email away. You can email microgrants@researchamerica.org, and we'll be happy to respond to any immediate or longer term questions that you might have. And the email is in the chat right there. Great. So thank you. We welcome your applications. We look forward to reviewing them. And have a great rest of your day. We appreciate it.